My name is Garibay. I'm the Assistant Dean of Student Affairs for Muir College at UC San Diego, Muir College is one of the 7 undergraduate colleges here at UC San Diego. And in my role in Student Affairs, so each college has its own Student Affairs unit. And in my specific role, I help support students who may be in distress. I'll meet students through the student conduct process, as well as through leadership opportunities, whether in student organizations, as a student intern, or I also facilitate leadership programs. So it's a little bit of the extra co-curricular activities that take place outside of the classroom, in which I help support students through that process. So in terms of my childhood, I grew up in Puente, California, which is a small suburb outside of in Los Angeles County. I would describe it most as like a working class, middle class type of environment. In terms of the population, predominantly Latinx, in terms of the community there. Yeah, and so that's a little bit about the place I grew up in. In terms of my family structure, so my dad worked at a steel factory there near La Puente, and then my mom went back to school as well as went back to work when I was a kid. And so she started off as like an instructional aide for kindergarten, and then continued being a kindergarten teacher later on. And so in terms of my childhood, so also into additional context, I have 3 older siblings who are a little bit older than I am. So 13, 12, 11 years older than I am. And because of the combination of my mom going back to school, plus my siblings being older and like thinking about college and stuff, college and education has always kind of been embedded in terms of my upbringing and my childhood. I remember even like as a little kid, so since my mom was teaching a class, like I would also pretend like I had a class of students as well. And so the combination of us would like be teaching classes and share stories about our rosters and how our students are doing. And so I always and I never thought I would be a teacher or anything like that, but it was always like in the back of my head, the education was just always like a given. And so because it was a working class, middle class, obviously it did take a lot of resiliency and a lot of work to get to, thinking about like college and, being able to go on to higher education. But it was always something that was kind of like a given at the same time, because my mom really embedded in us like the importance of, getting an education and making sure that you do something, beyond La Puente. And so that was something that was always a part of me. And so, yeah, so she continued to do that in terms of really instilling that educational piece of it as well. I think because she went back to school and back to work around the same time, there was a shift in the dynamics of the family, where there was just like this blend of like progressive ideals that she was picking up in education, plus, more cultural values and traditions that we had growing up. And just kind of like that, I would really say, really helped shape my upbringing. It was sort of implied that I would go on to college, just based on like my mom really stressing that growing up. And, in college, they started having, or excuse me, in high school, they started talking to us about what our college expectations are and, thinking about different schools. I was actually really shy in high school. And so there's always a little part of me that's introverted. And so I was trying to find a smaller campus. And so I applied to a number of different private institutions just because I didn't want to do a kind of a large institution similar to like UCLA, for instance. And nothing bad about UCLA, but my brother went there. And I think that's part of the influence as well, is that my siblings also were in college around the time that I was, or had gone through college when I was like thinking about college myself. And so I saw based on their experiences what they enjoyed or didn't enjoy about their experiences. And so that's why I was leaning towards doing like a smaller private institution, which is, how I ended up at University of San Diego here in San Diego. Small private school. I went on campus for our campus tour. At that time, my brother worked for admissions at University of Redlands, and he would always get to know the admissions folks in the University of San Diego because alphabetically they were always like next to each other. And so he was like, try USD. I stepped foot on campus, and I just felt like I belonged there. Like I just felt like, and something about the feeling, the mood of the campus. I was just like, oh, this is something I can see myself at. And my mom encouraged, me as well. I got a really good scholarship to go there. And so that's how, when it came to make a decision about it, I decided to go there. The other benefits of it is that it was like close enough to family, where if I needed to drive up, I could, but not too close to family that if they just needed to come visit me, there was that a little bit of distance. So it was a happy medium, and I just kind of felt at place there. In terms of me starting at University of San Diego, although I had a really good experience just visiting the campus, I had a challenging experience because University of San Diego is predominantly white, pretty affluent university. And so in terms of my sense of belonging, it was, even though I felt like good about my decision to go there, it was still challenging trying to find my place in the community early on. At that time, my brother had transitioned to a new position there at the Multicultural Center, and and one day I like set up a lunch to go visit him. I didn't really know much about the Multicultural Center, but he was running late from a meeting, and in that time, I was able to connect and meet with other students at who were at the Multicultural Center. And I don't know if it was intentional that he like was late, but it was helpful because it was allowed me the opportunity to connect with other students. And I was like, oh, I can see myself hang out here and getting involved. And then that springboarded to other things and finding my place on campus. And so I ended up getting really involved at the University of San Diego. I became part of student government. I joined other student organizations. I became part of the orientation team. I really immersed myself in like the leadership and opportunities that they had at USD. And so once that happened, then, I continued to get more and more involved. And then I had an advisor in my student government who was like, oh, like, you can get a degree for this, right? Like you can get a master's in, leadership or higher education or student affairs and continue this type of work. And I was like, oh, like, yeah, of course. Like, of course you have like another degree in terms of this type of work. And so he, at that time I was, torn between if I want to do a master's, if I want to go work. And, he just informed me about this field of student affairs. And like, I was always involved in student affairs, but never thought of it as like something I can work in, And I was like, of course, like you have a job in student affairs, like why wouldn't I be able to work in student affairs too? And I think that then and I also really enjoyed my experience at USD. So I wanted to continue there as well. And so this was like, again, one of those things around it just being a really good fit where I was like, okay, well, I want to continue doing this. I'm really enjoying what I'm doing in my leadership, in my leadership roles, like potentially I can do this, in terms of helping support other students in their experiences. Because for me, it was about, not just because like I wanted to continue and pursue this, but also there was a part of me that's also like, I can then help foster that type of environment for newer students coming through. So, for that other Mario who comes through, who doesn't feel like they belong at the university, like I then can be like my advisors or their staff who helped, create that community, foster that space for them as well. And so there was that part of like giving back to others like me. And so I think that was a part of it as well as wanting to continue to pursue it. And then it worked out that USD also had a program there. So I was able to continue to be part of the USD community. So graduate school was daunting at first. Like it was very different than undergrad. And so part of me at some point, and maybe it's just that imposter syndrome or when you start off in a new program or something, I was like, maybe I'm not ready for this because like, here I am. I was just like involved in student government. I'm like, yeah, I want to continue. I want to do this. And then I had a really challenging first semester in terms of academics. And I'm just like, oh, this is different. Like this is high level theory. Also like one of the classes I had was like a group dynamics class. And it was really intense for someone who was like new and right out of undergrad, but in the same class with doctoral students who have been doing this type of work for a long time. And so but part of it is like, again, I think there's other individuals who are like, it's okay, like you belong here, right? And so I think that like that continues even beyond like my undergrad, where I was like, I had individuals and advisors and other staff people are like, it's, the first quarter is always going to, or the first semester is always going to be challenging. And there's people here to support you. And, you got into the program on your own merit. It's not like you were just like given this. And I think it was really important to hear things like that in terms of that motivation. And then in terms of kind of like always going back to the idea that in the long run, like I'm doing this for a reason, right? Like it's not just, on a whim. Like it's a very expensive whim. It's a very time intensive whim for me to just be like, oh, I'm just going to do a master's program. But it was something that like always in the back of my head knew that at some point I wanted to be in a role where I help others, and that was going to be my motivation to get through the program. So I think the combination of that support that I got, and then that motivation, keeping, essentially my eye on the prize in terms of, I want to give back. I want to give back in the community. I want to, help foster that sense of belonging for other students. And in order for me to do it, I have to be able to continue through this program. And it got me through it. And there, yeah. And now here I am. Around the same time, my mom had just, I don't know, she had completed another certificate program. She had completed her master's program at some point. I think that totally aligns with, I think just in general, my family was always about education. My mom, especially, like really stressing like the importance of education and getting that, and continuing pursuing that. So for her, because she had the master's program, because my brother had already gone through a master's program as well, it didn't seem as unrealistic in terms of like nobody in my family didn't, like there was other people in my family who were able to do it. And so I think that was always helpful to have. I think my mom secretly wanted me back home because, she was hoping that maybe after undergrad I would come back to Los Angeles. But I mean, she was fully supportive of it. And I think because she valued education so much, it's, I think, what really reminded her, like, it was never a thing where it's like it was competing with the family or anything. It was always like, this is just part of the process. And she was there to support me every step of the way. My dad didn't quite understand my program, so that was a little bit different. He didn't understand my program, number one. He didn't understand why I was going back for a master's, but that's just because he didn't grow up with that, right? So I think his formal education went up to about the third or fourth grade. So that's all he really knew. And I think he tried to do high school here when he immigrated to the United States, but it wasn't the same. And it wasn't something that like was aligned with what he wanted to do. So he ended up just working and dropping out of high school when he came here to the US. And so I think it was harder for him to understand what I was doing or why I was doing it. But I think he still understood the importance of it and why it was important, and was still very much like supportive and proud of me throughout the process. But yeah, so I would say that it varied, but I think because, again, I think other folks had gone through the program in their own respective fields, that they understood, what it was for me and why it was important for me. So I just recently graduated from program in 2020. I was supposed to walk in 2020, but wasn't able to walk until 2022. But yeah, so I did the program. It was around the time that I was transitioning down to San Diego. And I was looking at doctorate programs. Around that time, I was doing various job searches. And I realized in order to be more competitive, doctorate was on the table and something I had to take into consideration. And, similar to like my grad program in terms of, making sure that I'm motivated, making sure that, it's something that I really invested in. I had to like explore different options and whatnot. And one of the ones that I was already looking at when I was at UC Irvine was the UC San Diego San Marcos one, primarily because it was a good, it really emphasized, aside from equity and just social justice, it also emphasized, praxis and being able to apply what you learned in the classroom in the real world. And so that was something that like intrigued me, because obviously that aligns with, what my own style is in general when it comes to my education. And also like, I like learning and I like growing. And around the same time, my mom had passed away, and she was looking at various doctorate programs in K-12, so continuing in it. And so there's like this like sentimental part of me, this like personal side where I was like, so my mom wasn't able to complete the program or even get to in a program. And so for me, it was like, okay, I'm going to do this for her. Like she always emphasized education was really important. She always emphasized like continue to pursue, and continue to do more. Like, I think I get my overachiever status from her, and I think when she passed away, there was like this certain like calling in me. I was like, I need to do this, and I need it for her. And so, I happened upon the program. I came down to San Diego around the same time. It just worked out with the timing wise, that I was able to continue, that I was able to be down here in San Diego while being in the program. And so, yeah, and then then I applied and I got in, and, I have no regrets about the program. I actually really enjoyed the program. program here. Because again, it really did emphasize that element of, okay, making sure that you combine what you're learning in the classroom with what's happening in the real world. So at the time I was working in Warren College. A good example of that is I was working with transfer students in that role. And so being able to talk about transfer students in my program and do a project around research around transfer students, combining that and then maybe doing some applicability in terms of or some application in terms of the work that I was doing there in Warren College and combining that, and so yeah, so I think that that's sort of how I hopped into that. It was, again, same as with my master's program, felt very daunting at first. I was just like not ready for the amount of reading in that first quarter. But I'm so glad that I did it. And again, in terms of looking at the different programs, and both here, I was looking up in Orange County as well here in San Diego. It was a good fit because, again, it was just, they staggered the program out over 3.5 years. So the assumption that you come in with your master's already, and they stagger the program. So it's a way that as long as you kind of know what you want to do at the beginning, you can kind of use the coursework throughout the 3.5 years to be able to work towards what your dissertation is going to ultimately end up being. It was also, I think the people and the staff and the faculty there just really understood that we were all full-time working professionals. And so, there's just this like sense of empathy and, they were like, okay, we'll work with you as well in terms of kind of getting through this program. And I think also just, in general, I think it was, in terms of affordability, it was the best value for how much, the degree costs. Like, I think it was realistic given I was doing a lot of research and some programs are super expensive and I couldn't do it full time to get it paid for. So it was just a good balance of all different things. And it was a good fit. And also because I had both my undergrad and master's degrees from USD, I was looking to diversify my third degree as well. So it all aligned. Again, I don't know if this is a theme that's coming through in different things, but it just sort of aligned for me as well in terms of, a good fit for me. So after that, I decided I wanted to try something different. And so I went to work for a few years in Colorado. I did residential life and housing out there. And so I worked a few years out there, really enjoyed the experience, realized that I am meant to be back in California. So I came right back and then I continued working in higher ed and student affairs and res life specifically here at Loyola Marymount in Los Angeles. After a few years, or excuse me, after a year and some change at Loyola Marymount, I decided to transition to student conduct. And so I worked a few years at UC Irvine in the office of student conduct there. And around that time, I met who would be my wife when I was in Loyola Marymount and continued to date her through UC Irvine. And so we individually both wanted to come back to San Diego. Her family's down here. I fell in love with San Diego when I went here as an undergrad. And so we individually wanted to make our transition back to San Diego. And I was open to, different positions. She wanted to stay in res life. And so I happened across the position when I worked at Warren College at UC San Diego in student activities. And I was like, this is like a good fit. I enjoyed the idea of like the college system because I had learned about it and I'd heard about it. And I didn't really know about it as an undergrad. Had I been an undergrad and done better research about some of the public schools, I may have come actually to UC San Diego because it has the college system, which makes it feel more intimate in a larger campus and larger university, which I wanted like a small intimate space, like a private institution, which tend to be smaller. And I just didn't know about it. Right. And so, but I started meeting people at UC San Diego through my role in student conduct. And I was like, oh, tell me more about this college system. It sounds like, really interesting and somewhat unique. I know Santa Cruz has it too, but, I was really interested in it. And so at that point, I was like, yeah, I want to head down to UC San Diego. It's the type of population of students that I want to work with. It has the benefits of a larger institution, but also that tight-knit, smaller community that you get out of private school. And, it was a really good fit. So then I made my transition down here to UC San Diego in that role. I was at Warren College for about 5 or so years. And then right before the pandemic, I got this position as the assistant dean over at Muir College. So yeah, that's a little bit of my career trajectory. So I have different responsibilities as the assistant dean. A part of it is doing outreach to and programming for underrepresented populations. So that's like first gen transfer, underrepresented minority populations. So I work with them and do some series of programs for those individuals. In my role, I also do leadership programs. And one of the biggest things in my role in charge of that program is that really making sure that everyone sees themselves as potential leaders and having the capacity to be leaders. And so I frame it, workshop series around being able to really tap into people's leadership opportunities or abilities. I also do support students through like if they're students concerned or if they just need additional support, I can work with them to find the best resources on campus, or if it's just someone to talk to, I provide them that opportunity. And then also adjudicate cases related to student misconduct. So I do meet with students through that process too. And I really do enjoy student conduct primarily because it's educational in nature. And so it's about learning from mistakes, learning about the impact on the community and how we could move forward to make better decisions in the future. So it's a little bit of everything. But yeah, and I work with specifically Muir College, which is 1/7 of the population of the undergraduate students. So interacting with them in various ways. I also supervise our student activities person who hosts a number of different programs, social, cultural, and educational programming, as well as our new student orientation person as well. So, at the beginning of the year, we have an orientation program for all incoming students. And so that's a great way to connect with and engage with students right off the bat so that they have that sense of belonging right away. When you think about the student experience, I do think of it holistically. And I think part of it is, thinking back to my experience as an undergraduate too, I think a lot of my learning was in the classroom through my ethnic studies and sociology classes. But really, when I think about the application of what I've been learning in the classroom also applied to the outside of the classroom. And then also most of my learning, I think, came out of that. Like, I went from this really shy, timid person when I was my first year to someone who's a little bit more outgoing, who's a little bit more interpersonal and connecting with other people. And I think it's because I had these opportunities outside of the classroom as well. I learned more about myself as what it meant to be a Latinx person. Because growing up around other Latinx folks, it's sort of implied and you don't really explore your identity. But when I was taken away from my neighborhood in terms of going to college, really exploring my own personal identities as someone who's Latinx, but also someone who's man, and what does it mean to be straight, and what all those different types of things. And that's some stuff that you do learn in the classroom, but you really do learn it outside of the classroom too. And just like those leadership skills that you don't, or like the social skills that you get outside of the classroom, is part of it as well. And I think part of it is when I look at students that I work with, they're whole students. They're not just people who go to class. They're also people who live in our halls. They're also people who go to our events, and making sure that their overall experience is well-rounded so that they are learning outside of the classroom. So they are getting that support. They are getting that sense of community, because in order for them to fully thrive, their whole person has to thrive, and not just one segment of their experience, but as a whole, making sure that they're fully successful. And in order to do that, that does require a lot of stuff outside of the class as well. My kind of the stuff that I'm working on is really that serving component of it, of an HSI. I think oftentimes when folks think of an HSI, it's just about getting our numbers of Latinx identified folks up. But for me and my role, both in the college as well as with the Heritage Months and with CLSA, the Latinx Staff Association, it's about that retention piece, that serving piece. How do we make sure that once we get the students here on campus, that they're also really successful and thriving and not leaving the institution? Like, once we get them here, it's like, we can't just let them loose. We want to make sure that this is a community where they belong as well. And so in terms of the Heritage Months, that's been really helpful. So I did my dissertation on the retention and advancement of Latinx student affairs professionals, but a lot of it applies to students as well in terms of kind of some of the cultural values and things that will help with retention. One of the things is being able to be recognized on the community and celebrated in some context, some way as well. So I think for my role in the Heritage Month, I think one of the biggest things is that it allows our identity as Chicanx and Latinx folks to be seen on campus and to be celebrated and recognized and validated. So I think that's part of that experience through the Heritage Month stuff. In terms of CLSA, again, one of the things that I found in my research is that in order to help support and foster the success of our students, our staff also needs to be supported. And there needs to be a focus also on like how do we make sure that our staff are thriving, because we talk a lot about mentorship and we talk a lot about supporting our students, but if there isn't staff to help support them or help mentor them, then it's going to be challenging. And so I think that's where the CLSA stuff comes through. One of the biggest things also, again, in my research and just anecdotally, is that you see if students see themselves within faculty and staff as well, then they, then they aspire to those things. Like I fortunately had a mom and brothers and sister who went through college, and I was able to see myself in that because they had that experience. And so it's important for students now to see themselves in the staff, and represented in that way as well, so that they can see themselves there. And then also they can see themselves as part of the community too. And then specifically, one of the programs that we do through CLSA is a mentorship program, because again, you can have multiple mentors. Like myself, I have various mentors of various identities, but also one of those important things to have a mentor who has a similar cultural identity as you to help in terms of your retention. Because there's just, being Latinx, there's certain like cultural nuances that it's helpful that somebody knows what you're going through. They just like get it. And so it's helpful for that, for our mentorship program, because it's like not only people who are here at the institution who can help us connect to resources, because there's a lot of staff who can do that, but something about having someone who's Latinx identified in that way as well could help you navigate maybe what they call like the hidden curriculum, or just, things that you may not necessarily know from a perspective as a Latinx person. And so I think that's part of it as well, as being able to mentor and pair undergraduate students with, Latinx identified staff as well, to create that partnership, that mentorship, and help students navigate UC San Diego. I think two of the values here in Muir College and at UC San Diego in general are EDI or JEDI. Social justice, equity, diversity, inclusion is like an important value, as well as student-centeredness. And I think because we recognize that our work has to be adaptive to the experiences of our students and their diverse identities, then it allows us to be like, okay, what are best practices? What are you learning? What are you hearing about this? Because the student population will continue to grow and change, and the way that they need support, the way that they navigate college and universities and higher ed in general will change and evolve over time. I mean, I think the experiences of our students these days are influenced by things that are happening at the national level and, or at the global level, realistically. And I think part of that is because we always are thinking about the students in terms of the work that we do. It's a matter of like not having students necessarily adapt to the university, but having the university adapt to our students. And so it's like, what are the services and programs we're offering to best meet the needs of the students that are coming through? And I think also because of our focus around equity is being able to see that students will experience college in different ways. And so I think it's about really questioning sort of like what we've done, how we've done it, is that the best way that we're meeting all our students? And specifically, is that the best way that we're meeting the needs of our Latinx students, our Black students, our API identified students? And so being able to adapt what we've normally done over the past number of years to be able to, again, really focus and hone in, like, why are we here? We're here for the students. And so, that allows for flexibility and creativity to kind of just go away from what's been tradition to things that are really intentional and things that are really focused on our, the current student needs. In terms of the impact that I really want students to walk away with is that they all walk away with a sense of home, whatever that means for them, and that, they know that they belong and that they, I think, yes, I would love to host really great programs. I would love to really like redesign all the policies and procedures on campus so it's student centered. But at the end of the day, all this will matter more if that one student who felt like they were going to transfer out of our institution decided to stay, and I think really providing that community, really finding that sense of belonging is important for me to provide to students. So even if they don't come to any of my programs, as long as they feel like UC San Diego is their home, like that's my hope at the end of the day. So, I don't know if I'm going to be able to measure that impact, but my hope is that people feel like this is their home.